Hiya guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro RPG. The end of another week, the end of another poll. We've got a very definite win for When Gravity Fails for Cyberpunk. And this is going to be an interesting video, because this is a very interesting book. But normally I'd be holding up a copy of the book, but this is going to be a PDF review, because I've only got a digital copy of it. So we'll go over to the computer desktop in a wee second and have a look at that. And as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other poll-related stuff and some other channel-related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been guaranteed won't kidnap their brothers and force them through illegal surgery. A comment which will make more sense later on in the video. But anyway, if you'd like to join them and help the channel out, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage, then we've got a link to our Patreon in the description down below. If you click on that and check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's get on with having a look at When Gravity Fails. So, this is When Gravity Fails, adventuring in the world of George Alec Effinger's novels. It's a sourcebook for Cyberpunk, more specifically Cyberpunk 2020. It came out in 1992, and it's by Talsorian Games. Now, I remember this being on the shelves of a local bookshop when I was at college, so 2001-2002 sort of era. And it was of interest to me, but I was a poor student, so I never managed to pick it up. I didn't have enough money. And I remember looking at the cover, and I drew a conclusion as to what this was going to be about. And I was very, very wrong. What I drew from the conclusion is, on the back cover it mentions it's set some 200 years further down the timeline, from 2020. And When Gravity Fails. So I assumed it was going to be a near-orbit space exploration type of cyberpunk, where they're starting to colonize the solar system. Something like a cyberpunk version of The Expanse these days. And I was very, very wrong. It is not that. Let's have a look at the back cover to see what it is about. So it starts off with a quote. "I smiled. I don't carry a weapon, Mr. Bogatyrev. Not usually. I've never been in a situation where I needed one. Either the other guy has one and I do what he says, or he doesn't and I make him do what I say. Married Audran." Now that's the main character of the novels. I'm guessing it's a quote from one of the novels, but I don't know. I haven't actually read them. Come to the Casbah of 2202. Our Talsorian Games brings you the rules and background to book your campaign into the world of George A. Effinger novel. This supplement, written with assistance and input by the author, includes a study of Islam in the future, personality-modifying chips, new mind-altering substances, the technology of When Gravity Fails, and a cyberpunk adventure with a sexy twist. Now, I'm going to draw attention back to that quote at the end, but that's kind of what the game's about. Instead of it being set in the standard cyberpunk setting, where Japan and America have risen to cultural dominance of the world, where it's American culture but with a Japanese twist to it. This is where Islam and Arabic has risen to dominance, because the West, America, Europe, have collapsed and fragmented into smaller states, as has Russia. The Soviet Union lasted on for a bit longer. Obviously this was written round about the time that the Soviet Union was falling, but the books were written earlier. The Soviet Union lasted longer, but it has now collapsed into warring states as well, leaving the Middle East to grow to dominance and achieve its cultural control of the planet. And the books are set in an unnamed city, somewhere in the Middle East, where the cultures come into contact with one another. It's still a very globalized situation, people from different countries, but you've got different elements, like, as well as having the police, you've got the religious police. And it's quite an interesting idea. So let's start having a look through. So, inside, we've got a segment from George Alec Effinger. Want to know where that dark alley leads? What it's worth you to find out? Maybe all your money, maybe your life. I pictured some dark byways in When Gravity Fails, and I have Michael McDonald, William Moss, and David Ackerman, and the rest of the crew at Talsorian to thank for bringing that vision to dice-wielding reality. In the original novel, I was very concerned showing Marid as a loner and outsider, one who doesn't quite fit into his own noble and ancient heritage. I'm glad that RTG has taken the same care and effort to consult the proper experts and provide an accurate and plausible vision of the world of 2202. Everything's just a game to some people, right? You don't want to be standing next to them when payback happens. And it's an alright introduction. We've got different things, imagine a world where Casablanca collides with Blade Runner. Imagine midnight in the Budin. The Muller's call wakes you from a fevered sleep. You stagger to the open window. You blink away your Transpex hangover and focus on the landscape below. Minarets, domes, and microwave receivers spearing up into the desert night. So it's an interesting change-up. It's kind of recognisable, but we've got this Middle East setting. Almost an Arabian Nights twist to Cyberpunk, which is very, very interesting. Continuing through, got the contents page. We've got an introduction which talks about what they're trying to do with this book. And history of an alternate world. Now, we've got a longer timeline here. Obviously, when they wrote Cyberpunk 2020, they wrote it in about 1990, so they only had 3 decades to fill in. Whereas this has got 200 years to fill in between it was written. And there's a lot more things happening to the world as it fragments and things change. But the technology doesn't advance incredibly more. There's a lot more personality-based things here. But we've got the years, Japan buys most of Southeast Asia and begins to form the separate nations into a single economic entity. Soviet Union tries to develop Siberia as an oil region. Problems in the south persist. What else we got? Presidential elections are reinstated in the US in 2082. Greenhouse effects takes its toll. The waters of the earth have risen constantly in the last 100 years. Most of the coastal cities of the 20th century are knee-deep in water. So we've got lots of things happening. Saudi Arabia finishes a fusion power plant. It takes over operation of Capricorn colony on Mars and changes the colony's name to Ares. Chinese state dissolves when the high standard of living collapses. Overpopulation, famine, and other social pressures tear modern China apart. So lots of things happening in there. And then we're on to where the world stands in the 23rd century. So we've got things about the politics, technology and industry, the corporate presence, money, multinationals in gravity veils, and commodities and transport. So we're talking over food, cybernetics, medical supplies, etc. The environment, the house that man built. So it's talking about environmental collapse as, cities have flooded, heat has become uncontrollable. It's an interesting concept, especially where we are more environmentally aware now, to look back on what they thought. Even in 2202, the sky can still turn brown with hydrogen sulfide and nitrogen oxides. When that happens, it's best to stay indoors. We've got the regions of the world, so it talks through different areas. We can see on the map here how America's fragmented into smaller nations, how Russia's fragmented into smaller nations, how Europe looks generally the same, but is still split somewhat. We've still got, I think, East and West Germany there. Japan, Indonesia and South Pacific, North America and Mexico. We talk through different areas. China, India, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Antarctic sovereign nation, and space. And then we've got the city, which is the setting. As I said, it doesn't have a name. It lies at the edge of an unnamed desert, 50 miles from the coast, on the fringes of what once was the Arab Federate. Almost 2.5 million people live in it. And it talks through the areas. So we've got their names, but we've got foreign quarter, corporate business district, new amusement district, estates, places to be seen, so different things to do in it. And the Budin. Now this is the part of the city most captivating to foreigners. The Budin operates despite strict Islamic law because the Inams and Qadi realised that although they might not be able to eradicate sin, they could at least contain it. So it's the red light district, but for all crime. Alcoholic drinks, fornication, drugs, all in that area. And that's where most of the action happens. One of the things I find interesting about the Budin is the fact that because it's been created by a religious group to contain it all, there's 2 exits to the area. One leads to the cemetery, one leads to religion. Because you either get forgiven of your sins and leave that way, or you die. They're trying to send a message. But most of the people visiting don't care, they just travel through the areas to get to it. Clubs and shops buying and selling in the Budin. residents of it, politics, neighbourhoods within it, because it's a large area, public services, the police, the mutasib, the religious police. We've got transportation, the underworld, including Friedlander Bay, who is one of the main characters, a sort of fixer in the novels. The relation between Papa and Abu Adil. So it's got these two large businessmen. Other underworld groups. People of the city. So we've got the married Audran, the main character of the books here, with his stats and some background for him. Lieutenant Ocking, a cop. Freilander Bay, the corporate fixer. Habib and Labib, the stories that speak, the stones that speak, solos. Hassan the Shiite, a fixer. And just going through lots of characters out of the book, giving them stats. The Black Widow sisters, Bill the Cabbie. And we've got encounter tables to allow you, as you're travelling around the area, to have random encounters. There's a lot of these, for night, daytime in the Budin, night in the Budin. And then we've got a detailed chapter on Arabic culture and Islam, because obviously to a lot of us this is going to be very, very alien. So, 1600 years old, Islam is a reformation and continuation of the previous monotheistic religions. It also makes a big point that it's only a game. The authors are not Muslims. Some inaccuracies may have slipped through their research. Arabic names, the pillars of Islam, lots of background information. Obviously, as they say, they're not Islamic, they're not Arabic, so they are drawing on other sources. And this is before the internet was really available for them to do easier research. So they've done their best, but some mistakes can be in here. I've got the law, family and reputation, classes in Arab society, business and business etiquette, women in Arab society, technology, ideology, a glossary and proverbs section, pages of that. And then we're on to role-playing in the 23rd century. Everyone loves a mystery, because the books themselves are kind of detective novels. He's a private investigator in a cyberpunk type setting. Noir, the feeling of gravity, commodity of information, how teams would work, because obviously the books are set up, and just information, some ideas for things. And then we're on to new character classes. So an administrator, runners, private investigator, as previously published in Hardwired, a spy, how to play a spy, create one, chameleons, what your mission is, and different cyberpunk roles within when gravity fails. So techs and medics, rocker boys, corporates, netrunners, nomads, etc. And how those roles are slightly different. A bunch of new skills. To the cutting edge and back, the technology of when gravity fails. So we've got Modies and Daddies. Now these are personality chips. Now Daddies are add-ons. It's supposed to be a street name for add-ons. They've started calling them Daddies. And these are skills that you can slot. They will be a bit more than that. So you will get a gunfighter skill chip, but it won't just give you how to handle the gun, it'll also give you enhanced reactions and that kind of stuff. It comes as an entire set of skills, rather than just a single skill, like in Shadowrun and Cyberpunk itself. And then we've got Modies, which are entire personalities. And these are the addictive things that people like to slot a chip and experience what it is to be somebody else for a while. Somebody who lives a better life than them. And this is the addictive drug and is a major part of the world. We've got a big section here on proliferation of Modies, shooting up the electronic vein, Modies and Daddies, a technical overview, Modies in gameplay, types of Modies, getting hooked, insert personality rejection syndrome, and we've got types of Daddies here. So talking about the different skills, and then Mody examples, so you can get James Bond. James Bond, you're cool as ice, in combat you're an ace. Honey Pilar, Zargis Mohadi Khan, the perfect soldier, kick-ass. Sunny Day, Wise Counselor, 1,000 Nights and a Night. Type X moddies are used for torture. Then we've got Daddy examples. So we've got a sharpshooter. Increases your skill with handguns by +2. Secondary effect is to increase the user's level with other submachine guns or rifles by +1. Street Fighter increases brawling by +1 and melee by +2. So they are skill chips, but they're just a little more general than that. Constructing moddies and daddies, and the rules for creating your own specialised ones. This is quite a long section. And then we're going through a section about sex change. I actually kind of skip that. Biotech and transsexuality. Why let genetics stop you? The transsex revolution. And getting a sex change. Now, it kind of contradicts itself a bit here, saying that the Islamic culture is very much against it, but people are very accepting. So it's unsure whether people will like it or not. They're frowned upon or completely taboo in some cultures, but they're like, most people are just fine, you go and get a sex change and you be you. Which is very forward-looking for 1992, I have to say. Cybernetic bioware and biomechanics, so it goes through the corymbic implant and plug, which you need to slot these chips. Mody link, subdermal mody rack, nictating membranes, different cybernetic things, poison sacs and ducts, UV blockers, advanced cortical implant surgery, sectional cybernetics. This is apparently common in the world when gravity fails, that you can get cybernetics which you detach. So instead of getting a full cybernetic arm, you'll just get the cybernetic hand for the things you can put in it, medical sensors or cutting tools or extra strength. But it will be modular, so you can just snap it off and put a different hand on. Biomechanicals returning to the flesh. So they're weaving cyber technology with biotechnology a lot more as well. I think that later Cyberpunk Chromebooks tended to add this. Cyber psychosis prevention therapy, medical treatment, hospitals in the city, talk about cloning and controversy, suspended animation and medical freezing. We've got different types of drugs, side effects here, hacking through the future, netrunners in 2202, because the world is more fragmented. So there are no large global nets for netrunners to hack. There are ones in Europe, and I think it says Russia has a network, but there's much smaller ones within the city. So netrunners are going to be at a big disadvantage compared to in core Cyberpunk. We've got different areas here which have them. Different large nets. What this means to netrunners, you can't get there from here. Manual net running, back to basics. And we've got some sample cyber decks, different technology, personal items, weaponry. They tend to go heavily on needle guns, which are armor piercing, but we've got some slug throwers, Caesar guns, static pistols, lasers, pulse lasers, beam lasers, obstructions, which you can get like skin cream, which will obstruct lasers because it just won't be able to burn through it. Smart rounds, man-to-man missiles, beam splitters, different modification for weapons, Kevlar vests, resistant fabrics, hard plates, different armors. We've got different vehicles here onto those. Civilian vehicles, combustion car, rovers and trucks, aerodynes, all fairly familiar to you in Cyberpunk. Jump jets, hover tanks, various military vehicles. And we got a bit more detail on vehicle combat. And then we're on to the adventure. The Silken Knights. Now this is where it all falls apart from me. What we've had so far is introduction of some new interesting technology. The personality constructs and all that are an interesting way to take Cyberpunk, and the Arabic settings very, very interesting. The introductory adventure is a bit odd. So it's an adventure with 5 pre-gen characters. First problem for me, 3 of these characters are female prostitutes. Now, this is getting into territory I'm not 100% comfortable with, because in my games I don't tend to put sex along with it. I'm not a games master that has rapes happen. I don't tend to like that at all. But I can accept it as part of a setting, because we're dealing with the darker elements of the human psyche here. We've got alcoholism, we've got drug use, we've got prostitution, all crammed into one district where most of the stories are going to happen. So fair enough. But I feel they're very close to the line already. But it's where they go from here which takes it over that line, in my opinion. So, one of the girls is only 17. That's virtually a child. And even worse than that, she's described in the adventure as being the most popular girl in the brothel. That's getting a bit sick. We're getting into somebody's fetishistic region here. There's also the fact that the setup of the adventure is during an event one night, when the girls aren't expected to be sleeping with people, they're just being eye candy for an event. One of them slots a chip, and this has an effect on her. She starts to feel sick, and she starts to experience memories of a different life. And that starts them investigating what's going on. Now, is this a damaged chip? Has this caused it? Or is there something wrong with them? Now, the background story is that at some point previously, a year or so before, there were 4 brothers. Now, their father died and left control of the family fortune to the eldest brother, but the other 3 were planning to take control of that to gain access to the fortune, and I think you can see where this is going. The elder brother found out about it, had his brothers kidnapped, sex-changed, mind-wiped, reprogrammed as prostitutes, and put them to work in a local brothel. That line, I think we're quite far over it for me. This is way too much. And, okay, it redeems itself slightly. Turns out the 17-year-old isn't 17. She's actually a 20-year-old him, who happens to be very religious. And, knowing that he's gone from being this religious person to the most popular 17-year-old in the brothel is probably going to break him. It's really quite nasty. There's also a scene, we've got the situation here, the background, setting up what the players know about themselves, the pre-generated characters. So we've got the 3 prostitutes here. We've also got 2 other characters, their friends, Abdullah, a solo who works as the bouncer, and Simon DeWitt, a fixer. The ironic truth about it, talking about the brothel, the Silken Nights. Part 1, the first night, the party they go to, the chip that they're given, what happens, some different events which can happen at the party. Some party guests make advances at them. Somebody pops a dangerous black market animal Mody and thinks they're a psychotic animal. Someone claims to have seen a beggar attacked in a nearby alley by a demon. The religious police crash the party. But we talk about the effects of the character as they slot the chip. And different things which come back. She was definitely born a boy. A hospital on a gurney, a doctor speaking a foreign language. She was of noble or wealthy birth. She has 3 brothers. She has a brother whom she hates, and who hates her. She was outspoken and confident. Another hospital memory, in a dark room, wondering, are my brothers here? Running through the dark night as a little boy and being afraid, then comforted by father. She was good with weapons. She didn't want a sex change. And they go and see a cyberdoc to, analyse them and have a look at the chip that's had this effect on one of them. Now, the cyberdoc is an elderly lady who slots this chip, which is designed for a prostitute. And it describes how, considering Layla's advanced age and decrepit condition, it's quite disgusting. She's fondling herself and groping any men present. We're really getting into somebody's fetishes here. This is a little sick. We've got the memories as different people who come back. As they ask around, as they find out the truth, It turns out that the fixer from earlier in the book, Papa, has discovered this and thinks he can gain influence with them by putting them back into their old lives and giving them control of the family. So he's going to try and help them out. And they end up having to go back and work in the brothel while things move on. But they're going to be given a chance not to sleep with people. But even after they've started to discover who they are, they're still living in this brothel. There's a couple of things happen. There's a demon. So somebody slotted a chip, which makes them think that they're a demon and they're killing people. It's a bit Jack the Ripper. And then they get flown off to Germany. And they have the sex changes reversed. They have the chips removed, so they get their original personalities back and lose all the sex worker stuff. Not that they lose the memories they've still got all those. And they will be able to decide to raid their brother's home and regain control. What they do is up to them. At the end of the blasphemy, returning to the city, the estate they've got to break into, different people on the estate, wrapping it up. The players get wasted. Too bad, this is after all Cyberpunk. The players are dead, roll up new ones. Players go off on some unexpected tangent. The players have to retreat. They kill Habib. They take Habib alive. And that's the end of the adventure, with these prostitutes having discovered their men, having their sex changes reversed, and reclaiming their life, including one of them trying to pick up a relationship where they were getting ready to be married. But now they've got to say, the last 6 months I've been a prostitute in the brothel. We've got a map of the district here, the Budin, with different things in it. And that's it. Now, as a setting, When Gravity Fails is quite interesting. The technology and the cultural stuff making it Islamic, Arabic, cyberpunk future really quite interesting. The adventure's terrible. I hate that adventure. It's really nasty. It strikes me as somebody is spending too much time being excited about making people go through some depravity. And I remind you, a cyberpunk adventure with a sexy twist. Yeah, I don't think that's sexy, I'm afraid. I can't recommend this to people for the adventure, but you might be interested in the background setting itself. So, that was When Gravity Fails, and that won the poll this week. And, as I said at the start of the video, it's an interesting book. It's a little distasteful, but it was definitely interesting. I loved the first half of it, but the adventure made me feel very uncomfortable indeed. But I'm glad it won. Even though it made me feel a bit awkward, it's very, very different from anything I've covered on the channel before. So that's an absolute bonus for me. I love looking at different things. Now that came first in the poll with some 31% of the vote, which was way ahead of the second place, which was Tobin's Spirit Guide for Ghostbusters on 22%, which would have made a very different video indeed. The comedy action of West End Games' Ghostbusters game would have been totally different to this. In third place on 17% was D20 Future, which I'd have loved to have had a look through. The Judge Dredd Companion for Judge Dredd role-playing game from Games Workshop came in on 16%. And in fifth position was Denizens of Earthdawn Volume 2 on only 15%. Which I'm sad, because I love Earthdawn, it's one of my favourite fantasy settings, and I'd really love to cover one of those books. But alas, not this time. We got to look at something completely different instead. But anyway, they're all cleared out of the poll as usual. And this week I decided to go with some Shadowrun, because we haven't done Shadowrun in a couple of months. So we've got 5 Shadowrun adventures. We've got Celtic Double Cross from 1993, Ivy and Chrome from 1991, Elven Fire, also from 1991, Dragon Hunt from 1991 as well, and Total Eclipse from 1992. So all fairly early adventures, but we're getting into 2nd edition sort of territory here. So there's some very interesting stuff in here. Now I had thought about putting in a random Dungeons & Dragons adventure, but I decided not to because it would split the Shadowrun vote too much and be unfair to Shadowrun. So we've got 5 Shadowrun options, and I will do a separate video on the Dungeons & Dragons adventure, which is a 1978 Gary Gygax one. In fact, it might have come out before I get a chance to do these Shadowrun adventures. And other things I've been up to. Well, on DrivethruRPG, I've not really put out much this week. I've been working on one big project, which I did mention last week, but I didn't manage to get finished because some of the ideas are still not quite gelling together, and it's proving to be a lot of work. Now, I might get this out in the next week, and it's some very interesting ideas, or at least I think so. Or I might jump onto something else just to keep those creative juices flowing, rather than get bogged down in the little details of finishing this project. I might jump onto something else and get that out. But we shall see. And over on RPGgamer.org, well, I'm still working my way through the High Republic Shadows of Starlight comic series. We're on to the Nihil part of the comic series, issue 4, and we're introducing the bad guys and their technology, which is some interesting stuff. Stuff which isn't seen in the Galactic Civil War. Perhaps it's a little overpowered, but it is something new and interesting. So I'm enjoying creating that for the website. Now, if you're interested in seeing that, then click on over to rpggamer.org and join in the conversation. If you're into the Star Wars D6 system, then I'll be very interested to have your feedback on what I've been doing. But anyway, as usual, I think I've been wittering on for quite long enough. So thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.